All right, Senator Coates.
Well, I appreciate the passion of my colleague, and I know that he spent an extraordinary amount of time and effort trying to pull together bipartisan support for putting together the larger plan, which would incorporate a number of factors that could have put us on the path to fiscal health. And I was not the central part of that, but I was a part of it, and I think the chairman was also. And a number of efforts have been made, as you know, over the past 3 or 4 years, relative to how we achieve the so-called deal that reassures investors around the world, reassures the financial markets, and sends the message that they've finally gotten their act together, and that even though this will require a long-term effort to get to where we ultimately want to get, just coming together in support of something of that magnitude, which would include probably tax reform, a significant comprehensive tax reform, which would include entitlement, structural entitlement reform, puts them on the glide path to continued sustainability, which it's not on now, which would have incorporated both revenue and incorporate meaningful spending, replacing sequester with something far more efficient in terms of how we separate the essential functions of the federal government that we all want and know we need to support. From the, well, this would be nice to do, but we just don't have the money to do it, and once if we get it, maybe we should take it up, from the, why are we ever doing that in the first place? But despite the efforts, whether it's the Gang of Six, the Committee of 12, the Simpson-Bowles, Domenici-Rivlin, all the effort, the dinner party group that I've been a part of, they've all come up short. And they have not, and what has happened, it's led us to a series of crises, whether it's debt limit crisis, whether it's funding next year's government crisis, which we're facing here in just a week and a half. It has not removed that cloud of uncertainty that exists over, you talk to CEOs, business people, whether they're small, medium, and large, essentially kind of frozen in place in terms of hiring, in terms of expanding, in terms of research and development commitments, in terms of looking to the future. Now, the discouraging part of all this is that despite all these efforts, it appears that there's no real early solution in place. The Congress is divided on how best to go forward versus revenue versus spending. The public is divided in terms of what we think they want us to do. I think it's fair to say that the current administration is holding to a formula which cannot be accepted by the Congress. And so, despite this, we've stumbled through. I think everyone acknowledges that we could have been doing much better. My question is, stepping away a bit from the debt limit, anticipating that probably we're going to keep doing these kind of things for the next 3.5 years. We're going to have a new president in 2017. Based on your knowledge of where we are, what we've done so far, some of it constructive and helpful, but likely what we won't do going forward for the next 3.5 years, what is that new president going to face when he sits down with his team, his economics team, and say, okay, where are we? And what kind of situation are we in? Are we going to continue to have to rely on some outside precipitating factor, like what happened in Europe, a Greece or a crisis or a spike in interest rates that's going to drive us to some type of compromise solution? I would just like to get your thoughts on that. Why don't we start with Dr. Zandi and go down the line? That's my only question, and give the panel a chance to address that question.
I think if Congress and the administration can come reasonably together and pass a budget, fund the government, extend the debt ceiling, and do nothing else, the economy will kick into gear. And in 2017, the next president will be facing an economy that's pretty close to full employment. I fully agree that we have long-term fiscal problems. Entitlement reform is necessary. Tax reform is necessary. But the key issue, the only missing ingredient to a much better economy over the next few years to really get things rolling here and get us back to full employment is for you all to come to terms and just sign on the dotted line, and we will be off and running.
But part of my question was not only what the...
Senator Coates, because you'd already gone over your time, we're just going to give each witness like 30 seconds like Dr. Zandy
Fine.
took to answer it, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Some quick points. It would be a missed opportunity right now to pass this opportunity by. I think critical is small steps. If there were simply one program that you knew of in the vast government that there could be bipartisan consensus on that it could be downsized, that would go a long way. That would be a starting point. It's something we're not doing right now. So by the time you get to 2017, if you assume things stay as they are now, that means there won't have been a single program that you can identify that needs to be downsized. So that means U.S. growth will have been slower. We'll have millions of people unemployed or who haven't found a job because of that inaction going on right now.
Dr. Barron?
So clearly, we'll miss many opportunities to do larger things. A couple things that will press. One emergency that's going to come in the 2016-2017 time period is the disability portion of Social Security, whose trust fund will likely run out of resources. And so the new president in 2017 may face that as a pressing new immediate fiscal challenge. And then one thing that will happen is a lot of the uncertainty around the implementation of health reform will presumably be resolved by then. Not all by any stretch, but we will learn a lot in the next few years about how health reform operates or doesn't operate, which I think will be very important information for thinking about healthcare going forward.
I'll say something optimistic. In the last 2 years, because we've frozen government spending, actually reduced it a little bit 2 years in a row, the deficit has fallen by more than 50%, and the burden of government spending has dropped by a couple of percentage points of GDP. And if over the next 3 years, before the next president comes in, if we simply limit the growth of government so it grows by 1% a year, the new president will have a balanced budget. And be in a much stronger position to start considering some of the entitlement reforms to deal with the long run. So I think there is light at the end of the tunnel if we can just make sure the trend lines are correct in terms of the growth of government versus the growth of the productive sector of the economy.
Madam Chairman, thank you.
Very good, Senator.